You guys having a great show? Great conference? Today I'm going to talk about, my name is Marc Reece, I'm going to be talking about simplifying the AR user experience from awareness to adoption and beyond, because I think it's important when we try to tell the story. As I said, my name is Marc Reece, and I'm the Digital Marketing Director for Cope and Goldeneye, and I'm in charge of the go-to-market strategy. I want to talk about simplicity, and I like this quote, because simplicity is about subtracting the obvious and adding the meaningful. And I think it's important because sometimes it's forgotten. We're doing really complex work, you're doing really complex work, and it's great and it's wonderful, and sometimes we have to break that down to a simpler message, and I think sometimes we forget about that. I think sometimes simplicity is the missing piece. I told you I was in charge of strategy, digital strategy for Goldeneye, and Goldeneye simplifies AR for enterprise customers, and it turns any set of safety glasses into AR-enabled smart glasses. We remove the processor, we remove the battery, we remove the storage, and what you have here is a device that looks like that. And we're demoing it out if you want to see it. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. As I said, I'm talking about strategy, I'm talking about simplicity. And like Bruce Lee said, simplicity is the key to brilliance. And even when you look at when you're trying to do a tweet or you're trying to send a message out, getting it to its simplest form sometimes is a challenge. The definition of simplicity is the quality or condition of being easy to understand or to do, making something seem not complicated. And that's what my job is, try to make something seem not complicated. I talk with a lot of end users. And although in the labs we think this is really easy to understand, I can tell you that it's not, especially when it gets down to a line worker. They have questions, we're not educating them. And the challenge comes is how do we do that? How do we get that message so that somebody understands what the heck we're talking about? So I want to talk about French baguettes for a minute. In my previous life, I was a pastry chef. I owned a bakery, and I made baguettes. And you go to a bakery, and you look at the baguettes or any bread, and it's got a nice golden brown, it's got a nice white dusting of flour on it. And what most people won't realize is there's 4 ingredients to most bread, and it's flour, salt, water, and yeast. And it's how we manipulate those 4 simple ingredients that makes that. But then it gets into a complex process of bread making. There's a 10-step process to making bread that a lot of people don't realize, and it's proofing. It's taking the outside air temperature, it's taking the internal bakery temperature, it's taking the water temperature, it's taking the elasticity of the gluten. And you have a complex process, and if one of those steps in that process goes awry, you might as well forget it. So what do French baguettes and AR have in common? Absolutely nothing. But the point I'm trying to make is that in a baguette, you probably don't care about the ingredients. You probably don't care about the bread baking process. When you go into a bakery, you care about how it tastes, the flavor. In AR, I can tell you this, the end user doesn't really care about how the device was engineered. They care if it will make them more productive, if it's simple to use. Does it solve the end user's problem? So I started asking myself, why is simplicity important? To illustrate this, my mom's photocopied her phone because she didn't know how to take a screenshot. This is a true story. I asked her to take a screenshot. Now I know how to take a screenshot. Probably everybody in here can take a screenshot, but my mom didn't. And she came back to me and she goes, well, I know how to program the VCR. Go figure. But this is what we're talking about when we're talking about simplicity. So Siegel and Gale, I don't know if you've heard of them, they have a simplicity index. And it's a stock portfolio comprised of publicly traded brands that put an emphasis on simplicity. And they outperform major indexes on brands that didn't by 830%. And that's pretty huge. If you ask me, this index has been going since 2009. These are the top 10 brands in the simplicity index. And they're the top 10 brands that are outperforming most other companies in the space or in their space. So what the previous graph shows us is that people are willing to pay more for simplicity. Brands that place an emphasis on simplicity outperform brands that don't. It's that simple. And I think we need to start taking that or carrying that over into the process of making these wonderful AR devices and start thinking about how do we simplify that to the simplest form factor. So what does this mean, and why should you people in the AR industry care, the people that create it? Simplicity increases adoption rates, loyalty, and revenue. And those are all good things. I think it's time we start raising the bar. We need to build trust. We need to aid the end user in the decision-making process, and we need to rethink how we communicate with our target audience. Again, it's easy to talk engineer to engineer. It's not so easy to talk engineer to field service tech. And that's who's using our devices. We just got back from CES and saw a lot of great devices. How practical are they? And if somebody doesn't understand what your device does, they're not going to use it. Typically, what we do is we look at the buying cycle, and it's like an infinity loop. And in the middle there, to the right, you see these are the stages where we buy and we select and we purchase. And that's kind of simple, right? We get salespeople involved. But then on the other side, this is where we have to own and support these devices. So as a marketer, I can tell a story. I can sell the product. But then I have to translate from what you build to what I sell, and then what the customer success team works. And if they can't support that, if they can't explain that, again, they're not going to adopt it. So I want to talk a minute about the buyer's journey, and this is really important because when people are searching for things, I think we tend, and this was the biggest problem I saw when I entered this industry, is we like to fascinate people with how smart we are, right? We want to tell people, look at how amazing we are, and I can talk tech all day long. But when somebody starts, and I'd like you to think about when you start a search on Google, you're in the awareness stage, right? And this is where the end user realizes that they have a problem. And they begin to search for a solution. They go to Google and they're not sure what they're looking for. I'm looking for smart glasses, AR-enabled something or others. What your job as a company is to take that messaging and it should address these questions at a very high level so that it's easy to understand and it helps educate them. Because that's one of the things that we do poorly, in my opinion, is that we fail to help educate people for now. And we're going to get into that in a second, but really keep it at a high level. And then they move from awareness to evaluation. And this is when the end user decides to start researching a little bit more in depth. They start really trying to define their problem, and they look for options to help them solve it. They start educating themselves on these potential solutions. It's our responsibility to create simple and easy to understand language mixed with digestible chunks of data to help educate them. Not a lot, just a little. And then we move to the purchase stage. And this is where the end user finally decides he's going to purchase, he's going to deploy, or he's going to pilot. And then we get wrapped up into the thing called pilot purgatory, where we do these essential pilots, and they keep going and going, and you're happy because they're piloting, but you're not making any money. It's a big problem. So we need to make sure that the process is simple. We need to make sure everything is understood. When I say I talk to end users all the time, I do. And at a show, a guy, who was a CTO, came up to me and we were talking. And I said to him, I said, what's the biggest challenge that you have? He said, I love this stuff. I can't get enough of it. And we're piloting a variety of different smart glasses. The problem is, I'm finding a problem inside my organization with my techs. They don't want to adopt it. They don't like it. And one tech said to me, I'll never forget this, he said, why don't you like it? He said, well, that looks stupid. All right, well, was it the glasses? He goes, no. They were testing out the remote expert technology, where an expert is in his office and the field tech is out in the office. And the field tech really wanted to say, hey, I know everything that I'm talking about, but because we were testing this, I think that my customer didn't understand what we were doing, and that I had to go back and ask home base. And I said, well, you can look at it that way, but then I started thinking about it. We're not educating the end user to educate the end user. Because that was an objection, but at the end of the day, what we've done is we saved that customer time, we saved that customer money, we had the part in stock, it was ordered. So you can look at it two ways. But again, they're not going to adopt it because they don't understand it, and they don't want anything to do with it. Nothing kills technology faster than lower user adoption. This is what I was talking about. You can have the greatest, most fantastic AR device out there. They don't like it. They're not going to use it. I want to talk a little bit about simplified messaging because it's about a story, right? I tell stories. We talk about this. We're trying to simplify it. And we tell stories, and that's what I'd like you guys to start thinking about too. How can you make it more accessible for me, the end user, to understand what you want me to do with your fantastic technology? We talk about features and benefits. The feature is a functionality that enables users of your device to do something. It might be a great optic display, it might be an accelerometer, it's something. But a benefit is the outcomes or results that the end user will hopefully experience by using your product. That's why you're building these, to solve problems, right? To solve people's problems. And I think you need to focus on that. Features are great, benefits are better. Features tell and benefits sell. A feature is complicated to understand. Don't assume the end user is on the same page. I love technology, but sometimes I go to some of these presentations, my face glazes over, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. Benefits sell, they're simple to understand, and they make adoption that much quicker. Simplifying your message is going to help people adopt that, and we're at the crux, I believe, this year and next, where we're going to skyrocket if we simplify our message. It says wicked smart. I love this term. It's a Massachusetts adjective if you're not from Massachusetts. Used to describe somebody with above average intelligence. And I would say I'm in a room full of really wicked smart people. And that's good news, because you guys can help tell the story. You guys can help simplify the message and help educate the consumer. But that's also bad news, because our industry has a lot of really wicked smart people to help educate the end user. Unfortunately, they use a lot of tech jargon and features and specifications, and you cause confusion and making things more complicated for us to sell your products. Remember, just because you know what your AR device will make the end user's life better, doesn't mean they do, even if you're talking to other tech people that share similar interests or know the same things that you do. We talked about this a few minutes ago. It's the buyer's journey. And when we're talking about creating content and making our messaging simpler, building awareness is as simple as blog posts and social posts. They're easy to understand. The user can go there and read it on their own time. They like that. They like to share that. You're educating them. Hey, look what I found. In the evaluation stage, podcasts and videos. Fantastic ways to connect with somebody. And then in the purchase stage, this is where you guys get to get as technical as you want with your product demonstrations, your pilot programs, your deployments, your tech jargon, all your white papers, and show how really smart you are. Because at that time, they bought into it, but they haven't bought in the awareness. They're almost bought into the evaluation, but the purchase, you haven't, because they made the decision to go with you guys. If Apple sold features, say hello to the iPad. Storage for 1 gigabyte of MP3s. I still have no clue how many songs I can fit on a 1 gigabyte player. Thank God they didn't sell features. They sold benefits. Say hello to the iPod. I can put 1,000 songs in my pocket. That's pretty awesome, because I got a pretty big music collection. It's a big difference. That solves a problem. 1 gigabyte doesn't. This was a retro computer, and I just like this. 11 megabytes of hard disk space, 64 kilobytes of fast RAM, and a Z880 computer for under $10,000. 2 floppy drives too. Naturally, it's from Comeco, under $10,000. Well, if we were selling the benefit, it would be large enough to store an impressive 2 songs in your pocket, or 11 JPEG photos from a smartphone or digital camera, all for under $2,000. Who wants one? Ready to learn more? So what I want you to take away is, I don't want you to forget about features or specifications, because all those are important because they make great products. But keep in mind, when people search on Google, they're searching for a simplified solution to a problem, not a feature or specification of a product. They're just not. Nobody's looking for that. If it solves problems, they're going to come and want to learn more information from you. From Steve Jobs, simple can be harder than complex, because you have to work really, really hard to get your talking clean, make it simple, but it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. The sky's the limit. You've earned their trust. My name is Marc Reece. If you want to see a demo of Golden, I will learn about Baguettes. I'm in the back room. Thank you for your time, folks.